Hello. How's it going? Client is asking me questions right before I hit start, and I'm like, "Oh, that's a quick answer, a quick question to answer." And then, of course, I can't find any of the code references I was thinking of. Well, all right. So the thing that I said I was going to do last week, I didn't. I need to move my keyboard over again, but we will chat while I'm doing that. Unplug you. We're swapping from this one to the split keyboard that I spend more time on my main rig with. Where is this? Luckily, I don't have to futz around too much with USBs because I just have a permanent USB in the same spot for both keyboards. Makes it a little bit easier. Okay. Go up there. Okay. Oh. All right. Whoop. What are we doing today? It is I need maybe I just need to take some time off. maybe that's part of my problem here. There's just I constantly get myself into too many things is probably also part of it. But it would be easier to take some time off and get on top of those things than it would be to try to change those long established habits. All right. So what are we doing today? We are taking. I wouldn't call it a little break. Oh, hey Nicola. What is that? No, that's not working. Come on, streamer bot. What are you doing? I just opened the actual why do you keep signing out? I appreciate the enthusiasm though, Nicola. Right. Sign in. Do the thing. Yes, sure. Continue. Okay. Cat hair on my desk. Okay, now where are we? They should start appearing here now that that's turned back on. We were doing a bunch of Verso stuff the past few weeks, I guess. Verso, just a little bit of background there. Verso is in some ways a browser built on top of Servo. In some ways similar to like Chrome built on top of Chromium. Not a perfect mirror, but conceptually same idea. What we were doing with Verso, we were able to bring in a Verso plugin that Tony, who we brought on the stream 3 weeks ago now, wrote or worked on, and it allows us to, through Verso, use Servo instead of the web view within Tauri. So you could use a Tauri app that instead targets what would effectively end up being a bundled version of Servo. So, a whole bunch of neat things there. It's very much not feature complete. It's coming along. It's seen a fair bit of progress recently. So we kind of explored the idea of it, and then we tried implementing it, and then we tried the last stream we did. We worked on some polyfills to try to get those to work. And actually, I have Tony followed up, and I've got 6 messages from Tony. Appreciate it. I haven't had a chance to actually like review it, but I think Tony opened up a PR against my PR in the To Do app to fix some things that we missed on stream. Like we were close. I could tell we were close, but we were also like speed running it, so there's bound to be mistakes. So again, I always appreciate the help. And I'm gonna go back and like comment on stuff and whatnot, so folks can follow along that are coming on, like getting up to speed using those videos in the coming weeks. That being said, though, I do want to look at Chromium embedded as well. I think there's reasons to have both. Well, technically all three. So System Web View, Verso, and CEF, Chromium embedded. We'll explore that when we talk about it, but I haven't actually scheduled it yet, but I'm very close to actually scheduling a stream for that. So stay tuned, and then we will kind of like covered all the in my mind, those are kind of the big upcoming features of Tauri. The way we've architected it and with the plugins in Tauri, it may not actually require major changes. And honestly, I think that's a good thing. Like the idea of using a major as a marketing push, I understand, but I don't love, because it's sort of contradictory to what the idea of Sumver is supposed to be saying. But that's a whole separate conversation. So I need to catch up on some stuff clearly, and we're going to kind of just do a little bit of a chill stream in between things here. We're coming back to an app that we have worked on stream on the past, but also I've been working on it for many years at this point. And the web technology is finally getting to a place where I can make substantial progress on it, which is good to see. But what I want to look at is dates today. There is, we're using a library called date functions, which when I first used it, I think it was probably still like V0 alpha type software. And we've upgraded to like V2 or 3, I think, in the repo. But they're at like V5 now, I believe. I don't know what it would take to upgrade. I don't think we're going to do that today because it's potentially substantial. Because a lot of the finance stuff that we're looking at is sort of highly dependent on when it occurs. But what I want to look at is I did run into a bug. I don't know if we'll be able to actually reproduce it. But I do want to look at how we're using the dates and how those feed into the charts. And it might be a little bit of planning. It might be a little bit debugging, depending on if we see any actual issues with the current date implementation. So that's what we're going to do today. I think, are we all set here? I don't need this. I don't need this. We got you over here. Let's make that bigger. All right. Okay. I think we're good. Speaking of dates, we actually, we'll flip on over here. I still have my tabs open from last time. We were looking at international date format, or duration format, and what we were specifically looking in this case was we needed a polyfill for it because it's something that is newer in the browsers. If we look at the like, it's like a new API, but like real new. So like Servo has been implementing the newer APIs because that's what folks are tending to use, or at least if you're using Servo, that's probably what you will be using. But it's like real new, to the point where it wasn't actually in Servo. So then we started having to go back into looking at polyfills. And that is in part because we're using a library called React Spectrum. React Spectrum is a library put out by some folks at Adobe, one of which is the core maintainer, main maintainer, original creator of Parcel.js. And along with this, so we're using this in our to-do app. Speaking of to-do app, which I actually forgot to fill out again. So my timestamps are going to be goofed up. We'll get on top of things eventually. I think I'm just going to take some vacation and catch up on everything because holy cow. In before Nicholas says exclamation mark 3D. So React Spectrum is a library that uses the uses the Adobe design system, and that works fine for this app. We didn't want or need or benefit, maybe that's best to say it, but we didn't benefit from using React Spectrum because we were going to have our own custom components, and like the design and how we place stuff, having more control over that would be beneficial. So what we're doing in Finatr, which is the project that we're looking at today, it's using a library called React Aria. So React Aria is a, do they say it here? I guess they don't specifically say headless. It comes with some, I think there's some like defaults-ish, or it's like browser level formatting. So like you can drop this in and you can use these, but you're going to want to put some CSS around it. So what we actually have right now is Tailwind and React Aria. And those are the sort of foundation of the components. And then on top of that, we're using Dinero.js, which is a library that helps with currency and internationalization of currency. And we're using date functions, which does the same but for dates. So we have all like the strappings of a good thing to build on top of, and we have quite a bit of progress here, if I do say so myself. And the thing that I specifically want to look at today is like if we go over to our cash flow, we have this starting date, and like the idea functionally works fine, and that's sort of what we've had for some time. But there's sort of this implicit in the previous iteration, it was a little bit more direct. But as we rehashed and switched to this new like table layout that I have, which is, I think this is based on a React Aria table. Don't quote me on that. I don't recall now actually. But I switched up the implementation of the table, in part because, I switched up the implementation in the table, but in that process, I kind of lost the more direct connection to the actual starting date, because like implicitly, each account and each transaction have like a date that it starts, or a date that you have that value. Like it's a snapshot. So if I say I have in my checking account $4,000, that is a snapshot that's at this current time, and it is potentially before or after other transactions have posted. So to get an accurate representation, you need to know when that snapshot was taken. So kind of implicitly already in this cash flow, we have this date, and that implicitly is like applying to everything. It doesn't matter so much because in part, this conversion was to take transactions and accounts and have like provide more direct value just by filling those in. So hi. Yes. Come on up. Say hi. Would not let me finish. Oh my. So implicitly we kind of had this like value to be gained just by adding these transactions. You being able to see it and like have it broken down with these daily values, which I'm still not like, I wish we could make these headers smaller. I don't know. But the fact that it's always squished is kind of annoying. No. We don't need to play with the chords. Could you hear the meow? She's got a very distinctive meow. I don't want this tail in my face, which is why I'm holding her tail down. Okay, so in switching that, I kind of like de-emphasized the fact that these are attached to a date. I mean, like you add in a start date. So like if you go in here, you put in a date when it starts, but I don't show that on here anymore. So there's like the date the transaction starts, but then there's also the date that you've taken the snapshot for your accounts. And if those don't necessarily line up, that will start to like throw this off. It matters less for this because what we're doing here is we're comparing the income versus the expenses. So it's just like, we just need to know like when the thing starts and how often it happens. And that boils down to that daily rate. And that daily rate ends up kind of dictating like, how much is this thing relative to everything else that you're like every other expense. And you can do this both as like, so income in this example is like we've got four, I guess technically two: checking, beginning of month, middle of month. The colors are make this a little bit confusing. Because we have two entries. So like this graph could definitely use a little bit of like a little bit of elbow grease. This was it works fine enough. Let's just roll with it and we'll come back to it. And it's been this way for a little bit. So there, like this beginning of month is bottom justified actually. So there's two squares here. There's two blue squares here, both of which are 2,800. And that 2,800 is relative to like, like bottom of the line here is actually, can I just do this? Yeah, no, that doesn't actually even really work either because my my blue is highlighting. Can I, let's see, computed. Let's just change a letter. And it's not updating, or I didn't change it enough. Whatever, it's fine. Blue squares relative to like the green square. So like the 2,800 is slightly less than the 3,200. So like that's the kind of comparisons that you're sort of doing here. Like how much is my grocery bill relative to my rent, or how much is my expenses relative to all of my income? Like that's the intent behind looking at this. And so the only thing that really matters right now as far as like the actual date or that snapshot, like when you took the snapshot, is this cash flow analysis, which is in some ways kind of an advanced concept, a graph. The idea is that you look at something like, we don't care about the IRA. So if we are looking at the credit card and the checking, I've got a little tooltip here, which isn't, the UX on that isn't great, but you can see that the checking is staying above zero. And like you want it to continue to stay above zero, but like having this much money in your checking account might not be great. There might be other or better places that you can put it, which would potentially give you better interest or whatnot. But what you're looking here is to make sure that in some ways, like your accounts are just not going below zero. In this case, the credit card goes below 0, but that's actually okay. And it's just not represented well because it literally just goes off the chart. But you would come to this and say, well, I want to make sure nothing's going below 0 and nothing's like eventually filling up. Like what's my burn rate? This starts to get into like corporate-ish type financing, and if you're at all into like startup, the startup world or corporate type KPI, OKR, etc. kind of talk, you might have heard the term like burn rate, and then basically it's just if I have $1 million and I have this much expense, how much time do I have left until that money runs out? Because I'm being paid, or I'm paying expenses and paying folks on a certain time period. So like that could be the blue or the green in this example. So every time one of those shows up, I need to make sure that I'm going to be bringing in enough money that I can extend that burn rate. And $1 million and a 5 in credit. Every bank loves that type of account, right? So that like conceptually you have a burn rate, and you just want to make sure that that is never going to run out, ideally until well, maybe not even until you die, because if you want to pass on some inheritance to the littles in your life, or relatives or what have you, partner, or if you don't want to leave them stuck with like funeral expenses or whatever, there's like multiple levels of planning here. There's what is it going to look like in the next week, what is it going to look like in the next month, year, etc., etc. So like this is sort of the beginning of like what does my present future look like. In personal finance, you might see a lot of the like retirement type planning, at least in the US, where we don't get the especially the expectations for like millennials or younger is you're kind of on your own when you retire. And I wouldn't say likely, but it's getting to the point where I don't think people are really expecting to get anything from the government when they retire. Ideally that situation changes, but different conversation. So when you're talking to like financial representatives or what have you for retirement, they are doing this exact same calculus. Just when you retire in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that chunk of money that you have has potentially increased in value because you're investing it or whatever, that in some sort of vehicle that makes that number go up versus what inflation is going up. And then once you retire, now you're basically burning down that account. Your burn rate is going to be ideally longer than you live. So in some cases you're guessing like you could live until 110, 120 years. Who knows when we're that old? They might have some pill that you take. Who knows? It's all human things. Like conceptually, the math is really simple. Which is part of why I was like, well, this shouldn't be too big of a deal. But then dates got in the way. Speaking of dates, so what we want to do, I think, I don't know if I'm going to be like, I ran a debug in my own instance, and I think it's something with this date versus like one of the starting dates. I don't know if we're actually going to be able to recreate it. So like this start date is 1/5/25, and this one ends up being 3/18. So like if we put this to like 2024, see, nothing has actually started yet because our transactions, most of them don't actually start until January. Like that's just how we have it set up, because the snapshot that we've now adjusted is saying, well, our balances in our accounts are as of 3. So what is that, March? Yeah, March 18th, 2024. But then none of our actual like income or expenses start happening until the beginning of this year. So that's why like this graph has nothing going on until the transactions start. So like that, you can kind of start seeing like how these pieces are interrelated, and you could like I could just bump these transactions back to say, let's bump this one back to 2024 as well, and it like in theory it should all work. So now our checking is going to go up, 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 and then we start hitting the expenses, and then it goes up, but just slower. So I guess in some ways what we have is a we have a date and we have a snapshot. I almost am tempted to say, like, if we look at the if we look at a account, we don't have any like date specified here either. So in converting over, part of this was scoping, part of this was well, you know, what if we think about this a little bit different? Because let's do GCM. I'm trying to talk and type at the same time. And that. So part of it is like, what we had before is that each one of these accounts had a date, and that date was effectively like the snapshot. And it was a little bit fuzzy because it was a single date, and we're not putting the time in there because that gets in. Well, part of it is that gets involved with time zones, and I was trying to eliminate that as part of the scope. But also, like, you don't really have control at what time things land in your bank, or like what time it's reflected in your account. And actually, in the U.S., the banks have the ability to reorder transactions when they land. So, especially if you have, I've got now cat hair on my mic, which is, where is that? One sec. There we go. Okay, good enough. In the U.S., we actually, banks have the ability to reorder transactions. So if you get a paycheck or you put in money in the bank and you have, say, your bill for your rent coming out of your bank on the same day, the banks actually have the ability to say, well, I want the expense to come out first and then the income go in. And that's how they start like tricking you into paying fees. So it's something that you have to be aware of if you live in the US, that you kind of need the money to be in the account for a day or 3 before your expense hits, because otherwise they'll just change it around, and then you potentially can go below 0, and then you start getting hit with fees. And like the way some banks do it is they will do the fee for every transaction. So if you have multiple, if you have $500 that are going into the bank, and you have 5 bills each, or excuse me, 10 bills each $50, those would even out, right? Well, they could have all of those land before the paycheck comes in, before you put $500 in. They could have all 10 of those land beforehand, and every one of those would be charged a fee. So $35 overdraft fee times 10. Now you've paid $350 just because they have the ability to screw you, basically. long story short, dates. So we're just focusing on the date. You have to be a little bit careful when you're taking the snapshot versus like when a transaction is showing up. But what we had before is that you could actually put in the date for each account. And that worked, but it started to become real complex because then it meant that you could update a few accounts, which would be convenient. But now the dates are different and it's hard to keep track of like, I've updated this value. That means transactions land at this time. And sometimes there's like interrelated pieces where you're transferring money from a savings account to a checking account. And if those snapshots aren't all like taken at the same time. So when we were doing a big refactor, I ended up pulling out that data and just putting it here. And I don't think that was necessarily the wrong decision. We can, I guess, open up our code. We've been talking a lot here. I don't think that's a wrong decision, but like we could, in theory, put in a date and potentially warn somebody of the issue. And in some ways, that might actually be the best way to go about that. Let's close a bunch of tabs here. We don't have any. Well, we got all these. I actually ended up taking it off Renovate because it was chatty, but not in a way that was helpful. There's a bunch of these like little upgrades, and no matter what I do with the settings, like I don't really need this immediately pushed in unless I'm running into the bug. I mean, it's nice to update that stuff, but also like this is a lot constantly being updated, and I've spent my time just debugging those rather than actually working on features. So we don't have any PRs. I'm just gonna work off the main branch for the moment. So it's kind of an open question, I guess. If we put in dates, we could potentially then like each one of these applications, or excuse me, each one of these accounts could have a date tied to it. So like you have 1200 on this date, or at least at like the beginning of that day, and that probably would like that. It worked before, but the question is, if we do that again, is there a way that we can make it more clear, or have a warning or something? Because once these start getting, you get this like interrelationship between the dates, or like that the time that you like the date of that snapshot versus the date of the snapshot for the other ones versus like whatever date range you're looking at for the chart. Is that making sense? The question is like how do we debug that? Or excuse me, how do we I was thinking of debugging that other issue. How do we go about making it clear when there's interactions that could make this graph, I don't know if confusing is the right word, but like we almost need like a warning label if some of these are off. But how are we going to figure that out? The issue could arise if you put in an account and the date of that snapshot, and if all the dates of the snapshot are not in line. And part of it too is like your starting date on this graph. If it goes before the date of your snapshot here, so like let's actually do that real quick. What if we go? Okay, our cash flow starts in 2024. Oh, we don't have account transaction dates. So if the further back we go, like this, oh, did I just recreate the issue? Console. Max, ooh, I might have. What if I refresh now? Hey, well, I ran into the issue. Extrapolate dates. Okay, well, I know how to recreate it, so we might actually have something to debug today. So there's this issue. I ran into this when I was playing around with the dates. We'll see if we can figure out what the actual issue is. What is my npm? npm run, npm start. Okay. We got something, or we have a way to recreate this now, which is good. So I think we'll probably start trying to debug this and figure out why it's happening. But like as we're going through, we'll want to think about, like if, as it is right now, we're assuming whatever date you have in the chart is the date of that snapshot. So, it kind of works, but it doesn't allow you to like start to look ahead. That's probably the first thing that I think you would run into um if we tie the range of the chart to when you took the snapshot for the account. If you move the range, so if we have a range from now to, where is my, here we go. If this is now and this is future, this is a range of time, right? If our chart is only showing this little bit here and we want to show out here, we could adjust the beginning of the range. The date could start here and end here. So this would be like January 1st, 2026. And then this could be January 1st, 2027. That's wow. Those dates are coming up fast. But this isn't, if we're basing the snapshot of our account off of that date, now we've shifted that value. So if we are able to extrapolate and say, well, you should actually have $3,000 in your checking account by the time you hit January 1st. If you don't have all those transactions that adjust from the snapshot to that date, now you're like potentially like all your numbers get affected effectively. That was a lot of effectivelys. I think we, at the very least, we need to separate out the date range of that chart from the date of the snapshot. So like we could, maybe the first step is a date for all of the accounts. And we could potentially do a thing where you like override or something, where you set the value for a certain account on a date and you could potentially leave it at it. So something like your IRA, you don't need to update that constantly. So you could just have it pegged to a specific date of a specific value and like it'll be fine enough. But then all your other accounts you want to always have up to date and you want to have it use like the default overall value. So maybe that's the first thing we look at. We'll poke at this bug, then we will come back and let's where is that in local storage? Local storage, I think. Yes. clear. Reload. There. And let's load in our examples. So this fixing this issue is fine when we're doing examples because I can literally just clear out the data. But right now the only like actual backup besides somebody going in and like exporting it. So like you can manually manage your data this way, which was like the first thing that I implemented because I didn't want to. Part of it was I don't want to depend on having a server. I mean, this technically is running off of a server, but like, you could potentially local host or host it locally if you want. And so part of it is like low infrastructure requirements for multiple reasons, but also data ownership. I want you to be able to own your own data. Like that was a big part of the way that I've set this up. And it's like continuing to form how I push it forward, which is why there's not really accounts, at least not, there's no sign up page. It's just jump in and try it out. So like that's part of the reason for that. Okay, so right now we have the one date. The starting date is here. That dictates the range of this chart. I think we put another date here in the accounts. That's just like this is the last time the snapshot was updated. That will give us a date that we can peg this value to. Even if it's applicable to all of these, like you have to update all your accounts and have that snapshot set for one date. I think it'll make this a little bit easier to use from a from the perspective of like the cash flow and that like chart range, because if they're pegged together every time, like the only thing you can look at, the date of the snapshot of your accounts needs to match your starting date, and like this is the time period you can look at, and that's it. As soon as you start adjusting this time period, then the data starts to go out the water. All right, so let's see if we can recreate this issue real quick in the localhost version. Do we have? Yes, we do. So I went down one. Yes. So in 2023, we get a maximum call size. I think I actually know why. And this is kind of interesting. And it's potentially involved to guard against. A little bit of cranberry juice and water because I don't need so much sugar. So this is interesting because what we're doing is we are, based off of the information you're inputting, determining when those transactions happen. So if we go, let's clear this out again so we can see something. Examples, this one. Transactions. Okay. So if we look at this, we've asked for the user to define a frequency. The frequency would be like, how often does this thing happen? Now, when we look at the cash flow, we take that frequency and we know if it's happening on the schedule, this is where that date functions library comes in. If we know that it's happening at that on that schedule, we can basically like we can extrapolate, which again, extrapolate, if you're unfamiliar with the word, it's the reason I'm using extrapolate is because I think inherent to that word is that the further out you extrapolate from the original source, the less accurate it's potentially going to be. So that's potentially something we want to be able to at least display or otherwise correct for. Correcting will be hard, but displaying that uncertainty as you extrapolate is potentially something that we can do. But if we know that you're getting a paycheck twice a month, we can plot that forward effectively. So we figure out and basically derive client side an array of values on dates. So we essentially have every date ends up being an entry in the array. If you have to start that extrapolation 2, 3, 4 years before we actually start getting, before we've even entered our chart range, that means that our arrays are going to be like 1,000 entries for every transaction. And every transaction is going to have like an in and out and a transfer, I believe. So that's probably why we're hitting that call stack, because the starting date, as that gets far enough away from like the dates that we're extrapolating from for our data, these arrays get really big, which is in part why I think a lot of this ends up being thrown on the server, because it can potentially be or require a bunch of compute, at least enough that the browser starts to fall down. This used to be like a real big issue 10 years ago or more, right around when I started really getting into this and working on it. Computers have gotten a lot better, especially like phones. This is actually usable on my phone now, and it was not many years ago. This iteration has also gotten a lot better, but like ended up setting down this project for a couple years there, just because like the compute wasn't there and what I wanted to do, and the infrastructure to do it just wasn't in a place where I wanted it to be, which is in part like demotivating, but also like I kept getting stuck in the implementation rather than the actual like the low level stuff, rather than putting features on top of this thing. So at some point it just would become unusable because it was just so slow, because the browsers didn't have the compute, or the APIs weren't they weren't in a place where it was fast enough effectively. So I remember when I started getting back into this, part of the joke was, how do you get a heavy compute browser app working? You just wait a few years for the compute to catch up to it. So coming back to this, how do we guard against it, I guess? So in part way, in part we want to allow the user to look at like slices of time, and we want to do some of that work ahead of time. So like we want to compute it ahead of time, so um it's not one of those situations where you like change a filter on the chart or something like that, and like the whole thing has to recalculate, and it's just like that situation makes it not fun to use, especially, and that's especially noticeable on your phone, because the compute there is less than like my computer. So we need to, in some ways, like limit the user from being able to, like at some point, somebody could effectively have like an infinite, like the array could be massively huge, and that's probably what's happening with this stacker. So we want to give them the ability or the option to play around with that range, but also sort of like limit it. So maybe the first step is saying, well, I only really care about the accounts and the transactions as of the snapshot. So the transactions have a start date. So implicitly, there's a time when they start. And prior to that, they wouldn't show up on the chart at all. Since we're already thinking about putting a date on the accounts, maybe we, how much time we have? If we put a date on the account, that means that we could use that as like the minimum of the range. The range can't, like we could take this and say your starting date can't be before your snapshot. And that won't entirely remove the ability to like have a massive array, but I think that will make a big difference because it won't need to do like calculating when these things happen ends up being a recursive function. And we can potentially let that recursive function kick around in the background. But it's a little surprising to me that that would be the. Let's look at that extrapolate. I don't want to like. I haven't looked at this extrapolate. I haven't looked at this in a while. Extrapolate dates. What does this even look like? Yeah, so we're building up new arrays and functionally it works, but also like we could probably improve. So I think there's probably two pieces to this. And I think maybe the first thing that we tackle is the snapshot for the account, because we kind of need that to really make that cash flow chart like really usable. And we might end up taking this starting range or this day range and squashing it down a little bit, so we don't need to do quite so much compute right out of the gate. But we can potentially come back to I guess this is extrapolate transactions, occurrences. Is I thought there was a date. Extrapolate dates. Did I spell that wrong? Extrapolate. Oh, file. The file is called extrapolate dates. The function though is not. So I'm guessing that I'm guessing that it was in this one. Without looking, I'm pretty sure it's in this one. But we're like building up arrays as we go through, and we can potentially improve that to reduce the memory profile. So like some of this ends up getting into performance tuning, but also we can at least resolve most of the situations where this would come up, I think, by implementing a feature. So I think we kind of look at that first. And like you can see, we've got some bits commented out because part of what I did was refactor and then scope things down a little bit when I did the refactor, because there was bits that were more experimental and not quite working. And then to roll that into the scope of a big refactor was a lot. So like there's parts in here that are just like turned off effectively. Really? I haven't actually looked at this bar chart account. Oh, you know what? It's because it's probably not updated. I don't even think I use that right now. Yeah, bar chart. Yeah, so like I'm technically have it imported, which I probably could not do. But I'm not actually running that code, which is why we haven't run into any of those errors. So I guess we look at the data model first. We have a chart range. Chart range has a start and an end. And sorry, I'm getting meetings planned for over the top of other planned meetings. Interesting. We'll let them figure it out. So we have a start and an end. And this is what dictates the generation of the data, and then the chart range then ends up showing up here. So the chart that we have written basically is just, here's data, put that data into SVGs. That like conceptually that makes a lot of sense for me, and which is why I've enjoyed using D3JS. So D3JS is a library that's been around for a while that is data driven. D3 stands for something data related. I don't remember what it is though. But like conceptually, the idea is that like you write a function and you just give it the data, and then you based off of that data, it just graphs whatever your function is telling it to do. So you're less manipulating SVGs and more manipulating the data to give to it to then put it into SVGs. So we need that, and I think we still keep that. But we also need a date, I think, specifically on the account. We do. Let's see, starting, and that's starting amount. And you can actually see here we've got a little bit of a. This is not in place right now, but this functionality used to be in scope, and then I scoped it out when I did a big refactor. But basically the idea of the payback is that in account could be like credit or loan, and you have potentially transactions and that's tied to that. But I could probably come back and reassess this because I think solved the issue slightly differently, which is less convoluted in our code. But we don't actually have any dates here. We do like calculate a stack, and this is all based off of resolve line chart data, and this is based off the chart range. So you can see based off that chart range, we are have it selected, all dates, and then we generate a big stack of data based off of that date range. So if our date range is 2022 to 2023, I think that's why we're getting the call stack error, because by the time we hit 2023, none of our transactions actually show up anywhere. And then we start to get into there's some like recursive thing I think that isn't considering that well, where we have no transactions that are showing up in the actual range we care about. So then it just keeps recursively trying to figure out, when does this transaction first occur. So I guess, let's see, stats. I think we end up writing a new new place to store that. This is we've actually put this into a couple projects now, some of which we've done on stream. This is using a library called StarFX. StarFX is in some ways a spiritual successor to Redux, particularly Redux Saga. and it is built on top of affection, which is using generators. And that allows us to do some rather powerful things and handle side effects in interesting ways, including some sync engine stuff that I've been slowly working through, mostly upstream at this point. But do I? Yeah, I've got a little spike here that right now StarFX is using Immer.js. Immer.js is an immutable like in-memory data store, which is I think Redux has worked with that for a while, so that's kind of standard in some ways. But the problem is we don't have a good concept of being able to like keep data in sync. And we could, in theory, write basically a sync engine on top of StarFX and Immer.js. But I was like, well, StarFX isn't inherently tied to Immer.js. It is a little bit, but like it's not tightly coupled. So I was experimenting with, we might have done some of this on stream. What does it look like if we use YJS, which expects multiple people to be working on potentially the same document, and also be able to sync it between multiple clients, multiple peers. So what if we basically just like outsource the sync engine part to it and use that as the data store, and then build on top of that through the like the middleware that's in StarFX, and also the is it React selector? I don't remember if it's a direct dependency or not. Form, Supabase, auth. It might not be a direct dependency. There's a, I think it's selector.js, which is built, I believe, specifically to work with Redux. But in some ways, it's like a way to memoize functions and their data, the data that they return. So if we say we want data in this shape based off of this input, it will only like update the output if the inputs change in whatever way we specify. So that allows us to do no ops by the time we get to the rendering part of it. So don't like recalculate it, this piece of data, unless we really need to, which helps because we have a bunch of derived data. If that snapshot value or the date changes, then we need to update a bunch of stuff. But if it isn't changing and we're just changing like the name or a description or something, we don't necessarily need to like regenerate these massive arrays of data. So like that kind of stuff helped a lot with the performance and the bottlenecks we had been previously running into. Okay, so we are building up on top of StarFX. It does a create store, and we give it a schema. This is where I'm thinking. Cache and loaders are sort of a built-in piece. Auth, I've got a little bit here to do this session. Settings are this. So as you toggle on pieces on and off, it shows that in the sidebar. The intent with that is, and I built the feature and then haven't implemented too much on top of it. The intent is like we want like progressive enhancement. Showing somebody a cash flow analysis right out of the gate can be intimidating. So like there's a way for you to just see all the things, like turn on advanced mode, but also there's pieces in place where you can work somebody up to that point. They hit some milestone or something like that, and then you can give some instructions or documentation that then says, well, I think you're ready to start looking at this chart. You've reached whatever milestone, turn it on, and you can start seeing this chart. So then we got the transactions account chart range, and then I think, yeah, these are for taxes, which is still very experimental and I don't really think is shown anywhere right now. So we're mostly working off of transactions and accounts. I guess in some ways I want to tie the date to the accounts. I guess though in some ways we've got a chart range. Chart range has a start and an end date. And I guess I don't really want to tie it to chart range because chart range, I think there's going to potentially be multiple utilities that show up there where if we have multiple charts, we kind of want to have like this idea of like there's transactions and there's potentially a little bit of derived data off of that transaction. So like we can take some of the inputs in the form and convert it into like an interval, like how often is this thing happening? So like the daily rate, we can compute off of a single transaction. And then in the same way, the chart range is the metadata related to potentially multiple charts, but in this case, it's just the cash flow analysis, which dictates like views on that chart. So we almost want like an account metadata. Is that what we want? Maybe we just start with that. Yeah, let's just start with that. We'll go with that. We'll see how far we can get on that. At least get to the point where we are rendering it maybe, and we can go from there. So chart, we'll say account meta, and we want to give it a. So in this case, we're giving it like an initial value. I think we could probably just do it in line here and say, well, actually, account. We'll do it separate. Export interface account meta. And we want to say like a default date, I guess. A default, initial date. This is like the snapshot date. That is the default unless you override it. Do we call it default? Maybe I'll just stick with snapshot date for right now. And then if we need to scale from there, we will. And this should be a, looks like I'm calling dates as a string. So I'm going to continue on that. This might end up being a little bit different, but we want to say this is a account meta type, and our reference date is this. I'm actually just going to put it right down here. Const default account snapshot date. And that will again be a account meta equals snapshot date, and it will be reference date. Now this is where it gets a little sticky because we have a date here, maybe we actually do call it a date. We're going to call it a date. Yeah. So what's kind of going back and forth in my head is the problem with setting it to a date is that when we serialize it, that date implicitly has like time zone, locale type information with it. And part of when we're saving it, I want it to be a little bit more portable than having it. I mean, it's kind of an odd situation because normally when you want to make a date portable and you put it in a string, you want to have that time zone information because it's that date is kind of particularly a date time is inherently tied to a specific point in time, which doesn't really matter the locale. The locale is just a display thing. Like this moment in time right now can be represented in multiple ways based off of the location. So, what time it is for me in my time zone is going to be different for potentially wherever you're at in a different time zone. But like functionally, it's the same moment. It's just represented in a different way because time relative things. So let's just stick with a date for right now. But we might need to think about that a little bit, purely just based off of the consideration of serialization. So if we serialize it, we want to, because the chart range matters less. You can have the, I think we can have the chart range just default to like the today's date and never actually save that out. Like I don't think there's going to be a reason to keep that data separate. So we might end up having to switch this back to a string because we want to serialize that out because that snapshot date is something that we do want to have saved with the rest of our data. And I guess on that, I do want to also just drop this in here so we don't completely forget about it, but we might end up, we'll put it there so I don't forget about it. And then account meta. But I'm going to leave it out just so it doesn't get weird with refreshes and caching. So this will give us a specific date. We do need to then wire up and change it. And if we look at, I guess, the accounts page, let's see if we can just render it real quick here. We could potentially write a quick selector for it. So selector, it's using create selector imported from StarFX, but this is specifically exported, I think, directly from that. Reselect. That's what it is. Reselect. Reselect.js, which is, well, I think it was originally built with the intent to work with Redux. Now, bar chart, and I think we go into here and just grab our date. So this is just the bar chart. We actually want to look here because this is going to have the bits that we care about. So here, use selector, date range, and date picker, date filter selector. It would be this is what we need. Why is calendar showing an issue? Calendar is possibly null. It's fine, sure. We could potentially tie it in directly with the accounts, but I'm just going to drop it here for right now. And then we need to import some bits. Parse date. You can see this parse date is from internationalized/date, which is a library that comes from the folks working in React Aria. We need a dispatch. We need a data, which should be the date range, and this is the thing to I've got a like meeting, what's the word that I'm looking for, an event in my calendar or whatever that says that I've got this time blocked off. Client keeps updating their invite and changing it to slightly different but later time, but also like in the same time block. That's why I keep looking over there, because I keep getting like up to, 15 minutes later, oh, invite. Okay. We need to do this. Import it from here, and then we should be set. I do have, so every time I hit save, it's reformatting these. I've got I think it's under the Trivago org in npm, but they've got is it a Prettier plugin or something? I don't quite remember, but anytime you save it, it just reorders these for you. However, we've defined it in the config, which is honestly, I honestly kind of really like it. I'm gonna drop this in here just because we will end up using something like it. So date range with strings, and then this is the selector. I don't think we actually need anything else in here. Let us go to, let's at least get this thing rendering into where we can change it, and then I'll worry about hooking up to the charts and stuff later. And that maybe that's a next week stream or something, but we'll scope it outside of the thing that we care about right now. So we've got a chart data, a chart range selector. I guess we kind of want a thunk. So a thunk would be like the thing that you dispatch to do the work. The way Redux and Redux Saga, that pattern, the idea is that it works through a reducer. You fire off a payload and then it just like does the thing. So it's kind of like HTTP like, where at least with how it's set up here, if you have a payload, you give it a function and you just say, hey, do the thing. And the thing that it actually does is like a separate function. So it's a part of this like generic store, and those actions are called the base implementation is called thunks. And most of the stuff that I've done here is built on top of a thunk. So like here we have a thunk.create, and we have an account add. So account add, account remove, and we call this, pass it the payload, and then that payload ends up getting dropped into here, and then we do whatever work we need to update the related store. So what I'm actually going to do is, there is a chart range. Yep. So this is the one that we update chart data range. Update chart data range. So I'm going to actually just copy this, and I'm going to put it in the accounts right now, because this feels very much connected to the accounts. Account snapshot date. So it's going to take a string. That start date input is the, we'll just call it date input. That's the payload. We run a parse on it. And that parse is from date functions. And we also do this. Probably could just do one of those. So we give it a payload, we parse, that gives us the start. Oh, I actually don't need to do the end because we don't care about that. So this would be the snapshot date. And snapshot date, we want to, in the schema, we change the account meta, set the, oh, actually, let me name it the same. Oh, it is. Great. Snapshot date. So we're going to set the snapshot date based off of whatever this parse date is. And this is where we're going to potentially get in a little bit of a question mark because I have it set as a date right now, but this is actually putting it as a string. Could run into issues there, but an issue for future us. So we'll say account date snapshot date update. Sure. Now we can pull it into here and we will need to then import it via that. We don't have a date range yet. We need to fix this. Calendar is possibly null. That's fine. The initial date range that we're starting with is there. That's fine. And here you can see we're actually, so the range, we're taking it from a string and parsing it down into an actual date, but via the internationalized. So that's the other thing. Like there's date in the browser, there's date what internationalized / date considers, but then there's also the stringified version that we have. So that gets a little complex. Well, we might want to like rehash or think about that slightly different, so we're not having to like remember which goes into which and vice versa. But that's not a right now thing. So this gives us our thunk that should update the store appropriately. And I mean, our selector is basically just going to be like, grab the value, right? So date range, we'll say snapshot date. And I guess I could just return directly that date. So we'll do that. And then this will end up being, so we can either give it a selector, which has some memoization built into it, and we can, there's abstraction here where we can build on top of this. So as we create a selector, we can then, abstraction is another, right? Compose. We can compose these. So a selector can compose multiple selectors. So a selector can derive some data and have that in some ways like cached or like a key to confirm that it needs to update or not. And then you can make another selector based off of that, so that this selector is only changing when previous selectors or their raw data has changed. Which again, I think doing all of this work client side, that ends up being probably a big performance difference. So I think I can actually just do one of these. So like that, all that being said, if we do a state, am I remembering that right? That's not helping us out. I mean, I guess at some point I'm going to want Yeah, okay. All right. Let's do a chart range. I'm going to copy this. We'll make a account meta. Paste. Just because I suspect we're going to end up building on top of this, and these selections end up being in some ways a little bit more involved, but also just the ability to like build up and compose them means that we can have multiple composed ones in the same file. All right, so schema dot account meta dot I guess we want to do select, and this will end up being snapshot date from, we'll just call it meta. And I don't think we need that as a selector, so we can delete these. And this should give us date range with strings. This should give us a selector to work with. And you can actually see here, oh, okay. No, actually, let's just do this. Yeah, let's just do this. We can do a schema dot, I think this is actually what I was thinking about. Select. And this will give us, I mean, it says it's a date, but it's actually a string at this point. And let's delete this one. Okay. It says it's built. There might be type errors, but I don't think it's actually going to block us from anything. Value.match. Okay. Yeah, this parsing is catching us. So snapshot date is of what form? Console dot. Oh, because it's actually a date right now, I bet you. So it is legitimately a date. If we go back here, we are setting a reference date to that date. What? How do we not run into that otherwise then? So we have a chart range. That is an actual date, right? Yep, just the base JavaScript date implementation. And then we're giving it chart range. So chart range does take a date. We're saying this is a date. When we first define it, we're making it a date. So this should be date object. Parse date takes a value string. What let's look at our implementation in this. Date range dot start string. So the reason it wasn't throwing in an error there is because we're using the stringified version, which is in our selector, we're doing one of these. Okay. So maybe we're gonna shift this around a little bit anyway. So I'm not gonna worry too much. There we go. We got this. We can choose this. We've got a date. We select it. It'll set it. Every time we refresh, since we're not saving it right now, it will reset to the date of. It will reset to today's date. Now, if we add it to the allow list, so as to persist it using the local persister, which is stores in local storage right now. If we say make this 222, and now we do a refresh, Invalid time value. Okay. Let's look at our actual store. Oh, this is probably coming back to again the in and out parsing of it. Yeah, accounts meta. So I guess we do use the stringified version for the chart range. I think we're gonna have to change that to, like, if we look at the accounts here, I can make this just a little bigger. Oh, actually not accounts. We want to look at transactions, I guess. So the start date is actually, just year, month, and day. No time zone. Okay, so we're getting a in date functions, convert the date in system time zone to the same date in UTC. Okay. Yeah, so there's a little bit of problems going back and forth here. Where is okay, so value needs to take a calendar date. It's doing a parse date with internationalized date. Here we're formatting it. We're formatting it to the we're formatting it to year, month, day. We're taking a, what is start? Start is actually a date. Snapshot date is a date. So we're calling format on it. Is this because we're flow? Here we go. Date. What date are we giving it? Parse date. So the value is the date range. It could be something with when the selector is updating or something. Let's log out the snapshot date. I want to ensure that it is actually a. Okay, so it looks like a stringified version of a date. I guess there's technically a time zone in there. Okay, so then if we run the format, no. Let's look at our, here. If we run this on it, what does this give us? I guess part of this too is when it comes in here, it says it's a date. I don't know that it actually is or not. So if we say console, well, here, let's do this. We'll just add it to this one, format, this. So format, snapshot date, like this. And let's see what we're getting. Okay, please use parse ISO to parse strings. So it is a string. This needs a string. So what happens if I just do this? Because it is technically a string, but it is complaining for some reason. Okay. Parse ISO. That's what I was asking for before, right? Please use parse ISO to parse strings. Oh, is that an import from here? Parse date. So date functions we originally had in here, right? And we'll just say it to I guess that's an ISO string. Just to make the TypeScript a little happy there. Originally we had date functions in here, and then I added the React REL later on, and that's part of what's yeah. Okay, maybe not. It's fine. You don't have to be happy, TypeScript. But then the problem is, yeah, okay, we're like looping on the fact that like it's a string versus not. Oh, and in part because we're like doing this. Okay, so parse. Okay, clear this. Go here. Clear you. Reload. What error do we get? Store payload, range error, invalid time value. The above error occurred in the accounts overview component. So parse ISO is throwing an issue. Argument string. So snapshot date. Okay, let's do it. Let's do this separate just so we can get a clean. I think this is giving it an issue because we're actually throwing the error before we log it out. Yeah. Okay. So snapshot date. And then it throws an error because this is actually date here until we then go to save it or change it, which is annoying. So this is part of the issue with we have date functions, we have internationalized date, and we have persistence. The persistence, that value represented in the persisted data is always going to be a string. So there's some expectation to like it goes in as a value and it comes out as a string. When it comes out, we then potentially need to like rehydrate it or convert it back. But then we're still like converting back and forth between internationalized dates and date functions. And date functions, I think we still want to keep because some of that is really valuable in the fact that like it can do the intervals and it's doing our or at least helping with calculations to graph the data and like represent all the dates on that graph. But the like this date picker, it's kind of built up with and expects it to be in this internationalized date format. So we end up having to go through these two date libraries. So how do we deal with it right now? I think we I think so this like when I refresh with nothing persisted, this comes back as a date. So if it is a date, I guess we could just do that. That'll at least work for now. Actually, you know what? No. Let's look at our persistence real quick. I got a itchy eye. If we look at this bit, we might be able to just tweak it here quickly. So database rehydrate. Oh my goodness, that's not fun. We do a little work to take things from transactions and accounts to otherwise convert them. Here, reconciler with reconstitution. Is that what I'm thinking of? Utils, yes. Here. So in here, we're saying if it is slice account or transaction, then we potentially do some work with it. And here we do one additional step here. If it is in that chart range, parse JSON. And the parse JSON is doing the date functions. Let's actually do this because I think this is going to save us a bunch. If reconstituted dot account meta, then we want to say snapshot date is this. So now it will always be a date by the time it hits our like reconstituted, or like once we pull it out of the persisted data in the local store, it will be a date. And now that means we should be able to go back here. And what time we're getting short on time. I'm gonna have to stop here in a few minutes, but hopefully we can get this to reload it correctly. So we have a snapshot date. This should always now be a date, regardless of when we have persisted it. We can see snapshot date. Those all look like dates. That means then we have a format date, and we should be able to just chuck it here, and hopefully that does what we need it to do. All right. Reload, invalid time value. It must be like, so this format will give it a date. Date picker. Start string. I mean, we're giving it that. It's possible that there's some other bit in here that is parse date is from internationalized date. Yep. Date range dot start string comes from use selector, and that's the one that we looked at. So start string would be this. We are calling format on chart range. Chart range should be a date. Parse date. All right, let's try clearing it out just one more time and make sure we're not getting in some weird loop or something. Okay, so we go here, we go to this. Let's look at our accounts, transactions, examples, and load that. Okay, so now we have data here. And if we just reload, still getting a range error. Format. Convert the date in system times onto the date in UTC. So the date coming in is not, I'm using the reference date here. So I would have expected it to work the same. So I wonder if there's something that we missed when it is account meta. Account meta dot snapshot date. Oh, reconstituted dot account meta. Yep, we did miss something. Okay. Clear, reload. There we go. Okay. So what it's doing is when we reload, if it is saved in local storage, we pull it out of local storage, convert it to a date, then format it back into a string so as it can be parsed by internationalized date and then be dumped in here, which is our date picker. We can format the width of that a little bit later, but that would then allow us to pick whatever date we want, say the 9th, and it should then save it back to the store as a date and then save it back to local storage as a string. So then when we reload it, redoes that whole process again. Sweet. Okay. I think we got that working. I think this is a good place to call it. So what we have done is we've taken the concept of like a starting date that was with the accounts inherently tied to the date range of our cash flow chart. And we separated it out. So now we have a starting date that we can, can be applicable to all of the accounts, which is separate from that range. And now we can use that date to actually dictate when to, basically start figuring out from this date in the accounts what's going to be our actual balance going forward. And then coming back to the issue we were seeing, we can set the minimum starting date here to, like in here in our chart, we can literally disable anything before our snapshot date so that you can't actually look at the graph prior to when before the accounts existed effectively. So I think that will not eliminate the error we were seeing, but reduce the situation or reduce the possibility that that situation happens where we get a really huge array of data that's trying to be generated and then we hit stack issues. Again, we still want to eventually deal with that, but this will work around most of the cases, I think, where folks would end up potentially running into it without realizing it. That being said, I think this is a good place to stop. I feel like we made some pretty good progress here. Next week, I think maybe the next week or two, I don't have anything specifically planned, but maybe the week after that. I'm looking at getting a date on the schedule to look at Chrome Embedded. So once I get that set, I will put that up on the schedule. And I'm going to try to get a bunch of the future streams all scheduled here, so you can do the YouTube things and get notified when those are all coming up, rather than me putting it in 12 hours before I actually do the stream or even less actually. That being said, again, we have a Discord. If when we open it up, I've had the Discord for actually years at this point, but I opened it up or expanded the scope of it more recently, and we've had a handful of folks join. If you're interested in Discord communities and you want to continue conversations that we've had on stream, feel free to hop in the Discord. Do I have a link? I will drop the link in the chat here, and we will be happy to see you. Whoop, right there. Hop in. Love to have you, and I'll keep on kind of expanding that into the other interests that we've dug into on stream, but also I kind of want to put a cooking channel. I would be interested to I enjoy cooking and having different types of foods, and I think it would be kind of fun to share that with y'all. We'll see though. Hop in. We will see you next week, whatever that ends up being scheduled for. Maybe finishing up this. We'll see. Check the schedule, hit the subscribe button, do the things. Have a great rest of your week, happy Tuesday, and I will see you next week at the same time. Button, where's the button? There it is. Bye.